The Rebellers by Jane Roberts. A novel. Read by Martin John. Chapter 11. Toby's men plunged forward, but their moment of hesitation had been costly. Fitch and Sloat reached one of the trucks. Mandy and Janice followed. Sloat started the motor. The truck moved ahead with a burst of speed. Toby's men aimed for the tires, but the truck sped toward the exit, a narrowing opening in the rocks that led out to the mountain road. Sloat cursed. "Damn, the entrance has a rock in front of it. You and Mandy jump out, Fitch, and move it while I slow down." Behind them, other trucks started up. Fitch and Mandy leaped out and pushed aside the rock just in time. They jumped back in the truck, and Sloat drove through. Now the shots came closer. For a moment the truck careened. Fitch thought that one of the tires had been hit, but Sloat had just taken a turn too quickly. Fitch looked back. Toby's men had stopped at the exit. "Toby won't follow us now. He won't take the chance of exposing anyone to the plague until he's ready to attack the gallery," Sloat said. "We made it." Fitch turned to Janice. She sat straight up, staring out the windshield to the dark mountain road. I knew damn well that Toby's voice was familiar. "He masqueraded as your father in the square, didn't he?" Sloat told me he took frequent absences from the Rebellers' headquarters. He acts as a sort of preacher, and that's how he picks up information and even incites small riots when it suits his purposes. She didn't answer. Sloat said, "You mean you really met Toby earlier?" "Janice was the girl you told me about, and Toby was her father." "Impossible!" "Impossible," Janice said. "Listen, Toby's smart, and don't forget it. His disguise was terrific. I met him years ago after my parents died. He's 10 years older than I am, and he's looked after me ever since. I'm not going to do anything to harm him either. I just can't stand the damn underground place of his. He took me there to protect me from the plague." "If you're so loyal to Toby, how come you warned me about the bed?" Fitch said. "It was you, wasn't it?" "It had to be. I should have seen a woman's hand in that, writing a message in the frosting of a cracker." "You saved my life once," she said defensively. "You pushed me out of the way that night when someone threw a heavy rock. It would have hit me right in the head. Besides, I felt guilty because I knew who you were all the while. Toby was going to take you to his headquarters, but you had to go off looking for a doctor, and all the stupid things." "You'll never live that doctor bit down," Sloat said. Fitch grinned. He was exhausted, but alert. As they sped along, he tried to perfect the plan that had been growing in his mind. Sloat said, "When we get to the burrow, where do we head?" The main building is where the mayor is. We're going right into the lion's den." Sloat lifted his eyebrows, but said nothing. Mandy said, "Hey, no kidding." And Janice said scornfully, "It won't do you any good. They'll never let you in." Already they were in a populated area. Sometimes the truck was more of a liability than a help. As usual, crowds filled the nighttime streets, milling about in erratic swirls of motion. The people refused to make way for the truck until Sloat pressed down on the gas and threatened to run them down. They pushed their way through the throngs that filled the square. The loudspeakers blared, "Work, work, work! Go, go, go!" The paintings glared down with their grotesque neon mobility. Fitch shivered. "If anyone told me that I'd be coming back here out of my own free will, I would have said that they were nuts." "It's incredible," Mandy said. His face was white, and Fitch started laughing. This was Mandy's first experience with the Burrow. He'd been taken directly to the rebellers' headquarters from the gallery. Nevertheless, he sat close to Janice, as if to protect her. Now and then she glared at him out of the corner of her eye. "There it is," Sloat said, pointing. Although it was late at night, the Burrow building was ablaze with lights. It rose in the distance like a huge quavering finger, 20 stories above the chaos of the square. Sloat broke off and swore. The place was so noisy that many people never even heard the truck, and he had to stop and blow his horn and race the motor until the crowd scattered out of the way. Fitch said ruefully, "Now I see why the A-Cop is such an advantage. You can skim above the ground and over this mess." "The trucks were easier to get at," Sloat said. "Hey, what happened? Look, the crowd's thinned out," Janice cried. Suddenly, a whole portion of the square was vacant. The loudspeakers blared, the paintings glimmered, but the people seemed to vanish into the air. The empty area was about a block wide. To either side of it, the crowds went about as usual. "What the devil?" Fitch started, but Mandy interrupted him. "Look over there," he shouted. Sloat slowed down. A body lay flat on the sidewalk where it had fallen, a chunk of dry bread beside its hand on the ground. The corpse looked dark and covered with shadow, although the square was well lit. "Don't get out," Sloat said sharply. "I can tell it's the plague without getting closer. Look at the purple color of the skin. That isn't shadow. If you turned him over, you'd see that his lips were blue." As they stared, horrified, a woman sprang from the side of a building and ran toward the body. "Plague! Don't touch him!" Sloat yelled at her. But as they watched, she turned a bitter, desperate face toward them, swung around with a quick gesture, and grabbed the dried bread from the ground beside the body. The whole thing took only a second, and then she disappeared. "She'll get it. Sure as the devil. She's probably infected already, Sloat said. I told you, Fitch. They'll take any chance just to get something to eat. So would you, if you were that hungry, Janice retorted. But her face was white. Her black hair seemed to emphasize her pallor. You never think it's going to get you, she said wildly. When it dies down for a while, you fool yourself into thinking that it won't ever come back. Then some night, like now, you see another blackened corpse. Toby had you inoculated, didn't he? Fitch said. Oh, sure, I'm inoculated, she said. The square was crowded again, but she kept looking back. I've always been afraid of the plague, that's all. I lived right here in the square, you know, not in some official apartment like Sloat here. She shot him an angry look and said, I wasn't going to stay locked up underground, though. I hate it down there. You never feel as if you can get enough air. Mandy made an indistinguishable noise with his tongue and put his arm around her. She snorted, I suppose you're going to protect me from the ugly world. That's a laugh. Boy, you're a babe in the woods. He blushed, but she grinned at him and let him leave his arm where it was. If anything, the square grew noisier. The slow, halting drive got on their nerves. Fitch was particularly impatient. He kept watching the Borough building. It seemed that they'd never reach it. His plan was daring. He wasn't even sure if he could carry it through, but he knew that he had to try. Do you think that you can get us in to see the mayor, Sloat? He said. Who knows? I'll do my best. You're taking a chance, you know. You and Mandy could end up back at the gallery, though I doubt it. The officials have got enough to worry about. Look out, Mandy shouted. A government truck came racing through the streets. It was painted black and white with crossbones. Screaming, the people scattered. It was a plague truck. As it plunged by, it forced Sloat off the street toward a crowd coming in the other direction. Whew, that was close, Sloat said. At least they're picking up the bodies of the plague victims. That's something. They approached another square. Work, 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 blared the speakers. A man about 3 feet away suddenly dropped to the ground. Whether from exhaustion or disease, Fitch couldn't tell. He'd just happened to be looking that way when the man fell. It was a less terrible incident than the others had witnessed, and yet it burned into his consciousness. He said angrily, Can't we go faster? This damn place is worse than I remembered it, if that's possible. Sloat looked at him wearily. Finally they approached the Borough building and pulled up in front. Every light was on inside. Curious crowds stood outside. That's odd, Sloat said. Usually nobody hangs around here. Well, follow me and we'll see what happens. A guard stood on either side of the entrance. Sloat showed his identification card and said, These people are with me. And to their surprise the guard motioned them through. The lobby was deserted. An elevator stood open, without an attendant, and they went in. "I don't like it," Sloat said. "Usually the security is tighter around here. Something isn't right at all. The place is too damn quiet." "This elevator sure beats the gallery dumbwaiters," Mandy said, remembering that crazy trip from our floor down to the kitchen when the attack came on. "I'll say," Fitch said. The elevator stopped. They walked into a corridor. Again all the lights were on, but the hallways were vacant. Sloat's chinless face acquired a worried frown. Open doors lined the corridors, and dusty desks stood before the draped windows. Finally, voices rose from a large room at the end of the corridor. "Must be a general meeting," Sloat said. He sounded relieved, and his face cleared. He and Fitch walked ahead, with Mandy and Janice behind them. Janice kept looking about, obviously impressed with the comparatively luxurious surroundings. Suddenly, a group of men came from an open door in the distance. They walked toward Fitch and Sloat without taking any notice of them at all. Sloat called out to one of them, "Hey, Bob, it's Sloat. What's going on? Discussing plague measures?" "Don't be a fool," the man said briefly and walked on. "He's a member of the city council too," Sloat said. "City council?" Janice said bitterly. "Who's fooling who? I lived in this damned borough all my life, and never seen one of them. What do? Hide in here?" The door at the end of the hall was open. They went in. A man stood with his back to them. "Mayor," Sloat said. When the man didn't turn, Sloat said, "Mayor Lyle." He and Fitch crossed the room. "What is it now?" the mayor said tonelessly. "We want to talk to you about the plague emergency," Fitch said. "So talk." "It's more than anyone else will do," the mayor said. He was short and tight-lipped and wiry. He turned a grave and short, strange laugh and sat down at the desk. "We have a plan to fight the plague," Fitch said soberly. "We understand that over 170 died here today." 187 exact count, the mayor said. "Not all of them directly within my borough, however. By tomorrow the total will be much higher. Now, what's this plan of yours? And if you'll forgive my curiosity, Sloat, what's the meaning of those nightshirts you're all wearing?" "Rebellers' robes," Sloat said. "These two were prisoners of the rebellers. They always wear them there. Damned warm." "Sorry I don't see any improvement," Mayor Lyle said dryly. "Now, what about this plan?" "I vouch for Fitch," Sloat began. "He's an artist." "I don't care who he is or who vouches for him," the mayor exploded. "I haven't slept for a week. The borough is in a hell of a fix. I've been thinking of nothing but the plague till I'm out of my mind. So if you've got any ideas, let's hear them. If it's any consolation, I'd listen to an idiot if he had any suggestions to make." Fitch came forward and began to speak firmly and quickly. This was the man he had to convince. So much hung in the balance that he didn't dare think of failure. Sloat watched him inquisitively, and Janice strolled around the room, stopping only when Fitch's words startled her into immobility. "I propose that you turn the affiliated gallery into a huge hospital," Fitch said. "Inoculate the artists against the plague and mobilize them to help fight it. We could throw up a barrier around as large an area as we could, to keep looters and stragglers out. Sloat tells me that the old bomb shelters honeycomb the borough. Disinfect them, clean them up, and evacuate as many people down there as possible. You have a paint that repels rats. Spread it all over. Get the state government or the national government to declare this an emergency area. I'm willing to lead an attack against the rebellers to force them to add their supplies to yours. Inoculate everyone." "I suppose you're going to stay around to supervise," Mayor Lyle said shortly. "I intend to." "Most refreshing," the mayor said. "However, there are a few things you should know. Sloat must have told you that it's an impossibility to even attempt mass inoculation. The people would take their chances with the plague before they'd trust the doctors." "We'll get the people inoculated," Fitch said grimly. "That was number 1, the mayor said. 2, we've more than enough to handle now without trying to attack the rebellers. That bunch I'd like to do away with, every damn one of them." His small face drew into a tight knot. "Sorry," he said, "but they've been the bane of my existence ever since I took office. They'll sit on their asses while the borough rots, I have no doubt. But I haven't the time to worry about them. And as far as emergency areas are concerned, the whole country is an emergency area, and has been for decades. The national government is merely a convention. It has no actuality any longer. It's the same with the state governments. The Contropolis is the only actuality, and the Contropolis is made up of a tangled mess of boroughs with no one to turn to. They'll run locally, if that's what you can call it, because no one can handle the problems involved. So that takes care of that." Fitch said angrily, "With your attitude, you're beaten before you start. I tell you, the rebellers have supplies. They also have good doctors and scientists. We'd have a corps of fairly healthy, strong, inoculated people to fight this thing. With the rebellers and the artists together, we'd have a chance. We'd have a chance if our attack on the rebellers was successful, if we could clean out the old bomb shelters, if we could throw up a barrier to keep infected people and looters out, if we weren't all dead first." Mayor Lyle stood up. "Look out this window," he said. "In my borough alone, we have 70,000 people. And my borough isn't a geographic entity. You just take 70,000 people and rope them off from millions and say, 'Now, this is one borough. They're half-starved, erratic. They breed as fast as conditions will allow. No natural defenses. Warnings from national government have come through that the plague is nationwide. Do you know what this means? He spun around. I tell you, it means that your plans are useless no matter how good they are. This plague has unholy strength. It's raging unchecked. We've had a warm fall, no cold winter to hold it back. We haven't enough vaccine on hand to inoculate the people even if they'd stand for it, and they won't. My city officials are making plans all right. They're planning to leave, and I might just join them. He stopped speaking abruptly and stared at Fitch with a touch of defiance. But why? Fitch yelled. This is your borough. Don't you care what happens to the people at all? And where can you go to begin with? You've been inoculated, haven't you? I have, but I don't trust inoculations either. If you want the truth, every time we get one virus licked, the plague develops a new one. And don't suggest that I haven't a sense of responsibility either. There isn't any hope for the masses, and it's stupid to suggest that there is. If my officials save themselves, then we can rebuild, if there's anything left to work with. Getting myself killed isn't going to help the people, and it sure as hell isn't going to help my wife and kids. If you want to be a hero, go ahead. You have my blessing. He paused and smiled ironically at Sloat. Incidentally, all of your idealistic friends have already gone, Sloat. They were the first ones to leave. The leader of the rebellers told me that you'd leave the people flat, Fitch said. I didn't believe them. It never occurred to me that the whole damn borough government would just walk out. The people haven't any chance regardless, the mayor shouted. The sooner you get that through your head, the better off you'll be. For the matter, how come this great interest and concern? He paused and said more kindly, If you come to your senses and decide to leave, I'll arrange transportation for you. Everyone in the room was silent. Sloat turned wearily toward the window. He'd obviously given up. Mandy looked bewildered. Janice glowered at the mayor, and the mayor watched Fitch inquiringly. Fitch walked up and down impatiently. He was more upset with the mayor's plan to leave the borough than he wanted to let on. I'm staying, he said angrily. I've been mad enough to do something since I've got out of the gallery, if you want to know. The rebellers captured Mandy, but I escaped. Funny word to use, looking back. But I thought that things would be better, not worse on the outside. I didn't do anything to better conditions at the gallery, but this time, for my own self-respect, I'm going to do all I can. You wait and see. One way or another, I'll force the rebellers to help. Mandy gulped and said hesitantly, I'd appreciate it if you'd get Janice out, though, Mayor Lyle. Hell, I'm staying with Fitch. He's such a scowler, he needs someone to keep him on an even keel. What do you think I am? A coward like he is? Janice cried, pointing at the mayor. I've lived in this filthy burro all my life, and I'm not budging." But the mayor was watching Sloat sardonically. Sloat said quietly, "I'll stay too, Mayor. You know, even the leader of the rebellers didn't have much use for us, and I'm beginning to think that he was right. We didn't actually do much, did we? I guess it's time that I stopped talking about the state of affairs and tried to do something about them." "Something all of you should know," the mayor said. "Only the chemical gardens separate one burrow from another. Now, I'm sure you're aware of that, but according to reports, the Binghamton burrow is in worse shape than we are. When the plague jumps that small barrier, watch out. Something else. Chaos will rule when this thing is over. I intend to be around to help rebuild it, and I can't do it if I'm dead." "Some excuse," Janice scoffed. "Listen, any nut that wants to can be made a borough deputy at this point," he smiled ironically. "You can even use the official apartments in this building. I doubt my men will be needing them much longer. Incidentally, the people haven't been informed of the plague. They know about it anyway, and official recognition will only add to the confusion. My men will evacuate in orderly fashion, too. Avoid riots. The people might not understand a mass exodus. It's only fair to warn you that you have no agency and no one to depend on. You're on your own. However, I'll give you a list of anyone I know who intends to stay on and who might help, of course." As he finished speaking, a buzzer rang. Fitch looked around suspiciously, but the mayor said, "Jumpy, aren't you? Look at my watch. See how it glows? The buzzer warns me that someone wants me on the televisor. I can use the midget one on the dial, but since I'm here and the console is available, we'll use that one instead." He touched a button on his desk, and the televisor on the other side of the room lit up. The image of a young man appeared. He said in a shaky voice, "Sir, a bunch of stragglers are coming down from the Bingham Borough, trying to keep ahead of the plague. They're armed. I know you gave orders to keep them out, but—" He broke off. The youthful face contorted. He yelled. The group in the mayor's office stared horrified. Janice turned her face away, and Mandy tried to steady her. Another face stared out from the screen now. Pox marks like huge black bubbles stood up from the man's emaciated cheeks. He screamed at them. "They'll kick us out of the borough. We've got to have food. We have to eat like anyone else. Do you hear me? We're coming through." In the background, the boy's voice screamed, "All right, go ahead. I won't try to stop you. Only don't touch me. Don't give me the plague. Don't come any closer. No, no!" The man grinned triumphantly, then switched the set off at his end. The picture disappeared. "It's begun," the mayor said. "God help us all." In Chapter 11, Peace, Light, and Love. Aloha.